Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our pre-meeting, our 5:15 pre-meeting. The first item on the agenda is the new town hall, and we're going to get an update on the public input in the schematic design. Mr. Williams.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We just wrapped up last week. We had listening sessions about a month ago, and then we did a 2-week survey after that. Heard a number of similar things to what we got from the listening sessions. We had 22 participants, a total of 31 comments in our open-ended survey that we put online. A number of the comments talked about accommodating future growth, be that for staff or for the roads, knowing that there may be future road widening. Talked about the building fitting within the existing architecture, but also setting the tone for future architecture in the downtown. Talked about a need for walkability and sidewalks, and along those lines, access for the whole community, related to community uses, hoping that there would be a variety of spaces, sizes, and access for different community groups. Also heard interest in things like EV charging stations and bicycle parking. Other uses in the building, be it space for nonprofits, be it space for voting, which certainly we have done here in the past, but when everything is utilized, we're quite limited as it relates to space for voting. One person mentioned seeing retail in the current town hall. That's something that certainly has come up from time to time. And then we had a variety of approaches to try to limit the number of bells and whistles in the building as a government building, versus some folks wanting to see some level of ornamentation, to some wanting to see more traditional design and architecture. So kind of ran the gamut, but wanted to at least give you sort of a snapshot of some of what we heard. Brent Green with Creech Design is here. They have continued to work through comments from the listening sessions, and we have shared this feedback with them as we've gotten it, as well as sort of the final snapshot of the feedback, and they've been factoring that into their designs, and then they're back with you guys here tonight to ask you a few more questions as it relates to design drivers, so we can keep moving through schematic design and ultimately get to the construction documents phase. Brent?
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to be with you again this evening. Hopefully, similar to last time, I'll have some questions to ask you and be able to spend some time listening. That will be the best use of our time this evening. I put this as our starter just to remind everyone of sort of our jumping off point. This was the option 4B that we all looked at when we were looking at options to move forward with. I think all of the basic parameters remain in check, keeping the existing town hall, looking at opportunities for reuse for it, and then the new town hall, if you will, down 115. So all of those parameters are still in place. I'll touch on this briefly as Bobby just mentioned it, but again, I think the listening sessions, the comments that we've received since really do fall in line with most of the comments that were received in the listening sessions. And that range there that we've talked about, staff space being adequate, thinking about, outside uses like market space or retail, as Bobby mentioned, setting the tone for future development. Those things are all still ideas that we had previously that were consistent through, this last round as we closed out. The whole not matching, but being complementary and providing aha moments are all things that we're excited to explore with you as we move forward. Whoops, that was a double. So tonight we really just have sort of 3.5, if you will, or 4 elements that we would love to speak with you about. One of the things that we heard repeatedly that's come up is, if you'll look there, the initial design did not include a drive-aisle entrance from 115. In other words, the parking lot was accessed from the rear or from Huntersville Concord Road. And that's something that many people have mentioned as something that could be perhaps a challenge as you're coming as a first-time user to the facility. So should we include that? And we've got some studies to show you. Back to that old question about where the boardroom should be located. Should it be in the center or off to one side? And I know some of us are going to be able to hopefully do some tours later this week, which may solidify this decision. So, perhaps that one doesn't, get finalized tonight, but, we're certainly open to your feedback on that topic. There's been some great discussion about security and some of the other things that were mentioned since our last meeting that we've had a chance to vet as well. Large community spaces, should there be any in the new town hall? Should they be repurposed in this building? And those are something that we've talked about as a group. And then we've really focused in on that outdoor space that we're going to be creating between the existing and new buildings and what the opportunities are there. So those are really sort of our 4 topics for the evening, and hopefully we've got some exhibits that'll facilitate discussion on each of those. So this represents our updated site plan. We'll call this a grading sketch because we now have our survey in hand, and we've been able to drill down a bit on how the building will relate to grade, to this building, and to its site in general. I will mention that, and I'll go back a slide, we're used to looking at, if you look at the top right, we're used to looking at the building oriented that way so that 115 is on our left. As we move forward, we're going to rotate 90 degrees so that moving forward, Old Statesville will be at the bottom of the page. I don't want to mess with anyone. We're changing the orientation so it fits better on the slides. Okay? So here's our updated site grading sketch, and you'll see up there in the top right, the first concept, as we mentioned, didn't really have that drive aisle, but we've gone and looked at what the implications are of including that. And we've taken one of our building diagrams and put that in white as a placeholder for now. So you can begin to see what that does. And I think in green there really is what it highlights, is effectively it shifts the building, the new building, about 30 feet closer to the existing town hall. There's no magic there. That's about the width required to facilitate the entrance drive. You can see there we actually may even have room to do some head-in parking or something like that as the site continues to develop. The finished floor of this building is around 813 1/4. The sidewalk entrance that you're looking at sort of in the middle of that white bar is 802, right? So we have almost 12 feet of grade change between here and there, which is kind of one of those elements we've been discussing. That building at the front door sort of wants to be around 808. At the back, it wants to be around 806. So again, we have some grade change to navigate. The next to last bullet is something we're still working on. We're working with DOT to determine if a right turn lane would be required if we do introduce this access from 115, which of course could shift us back a hair farther. But again, the biggest topic is just understanding that with that access comes a different relationship with the 2 buildings. Yes, ma'am.
Does it change the size of the building, or is this?
It does not change the size of the building. Great question. As of right now, we're literally sliding it uphill, if you will, or towards the existing facility. So it's not a limitation on size. So what we're looking at here is sections. I'll go back a slide. So we're going to look at as if you were cutting a section through the existing town hall and this new building that we're proposing. And the reason we do that graphically is so that you can see the difference that we're trying to illustrate in terms of grade. So that top image has the building where it is actually meeting the sidewalk in the center. And if there's no drive aisle, you can see we've got about 75 feet of distance between the two. And if you set the building at the sidewalk and you maintain that 75-foot distance, you can see the grade change that happens between those two. It's tough to navigate 11 feet inside of a plaza, even at 75 feet of depth, when you're talking about ramps and accessibility requirements. So we've talked a good bit about having a connection directly from that space into the building. If we approach it the way on top with holding the building down on the sidewalk, it's going to be really challenging. Okay. On the lower image, we are raising the building 6 feet. So instead of 802, we're looking at 808. And what that does is it moves the ramps and stairs from the courtyard to the front door. And that means that we can create an engaging front door that's a combination of arcade, ramps, stairways that bring everyone to the front entrance. You'll also notice in that lower image, we've shown you what the difference is in sliding the building over 30 feet. So it compresses that space, but it's actually still usable and could have a nice scale in terms of its use. Yes, sir.
So, Brent, on the bottom slide, the 45 feet or so, it appears that basically I'll say courtyard you see out of the back right now would go, it'd basically be right behind the bushes. We measured it today to kind of get an idea where the 45 feet is off I guess, the back patio, if you want to say. And it goes in between the asphalt where the parking is and in between the bushes. So it's about
That's about, if you need a reference for about where that falls, he's right. It's sort of about to the property line. And I have an exhibit, I think, on this next page that hopefully will help illustrate that. So these are all, as we're talking through, none of these elements are set in stone. Everything's fluid as we work through design. Here are two preliminary concepts that look at how we could provide accessibility from the right side, which is the existing building, to the left side, which would be the new building. These represent the 45-foot distance. So this is the tightest. Obviously, if we slide it down, this makes this a little bit easier, but we wanted to show you the most constrained as this example. So option A really sort of creates a series of stairs that kind of come down. We could create some type of focal element. It doesn't have to be a fountain, but it certainly could be. But you can see those ramps that kind of come down in a radius pattern to the top and bottom to create that space, that sort of flat space, plaza usable outside. If you look at option B, it takes the ramp and sort of makes it a little bit more monumental, and it sort of winds its way through that curved element, matches some landings with sort of a stair right down the middle. And the shaping is different, and it does provide a little bit less sort of hardscape space, but it could be a more engaging and terraced design. So those are the kind of elements that we're looking at in this plaza. But this gives you an idea of what that 45-foot dimension, what we could actually accomplish in that space and still meet the accessibility requirements. I'll pause here, please. Yes, sir.
And option B, if I'm in a wheelchair and I want to go from, I guess, the south building, which is this building, up to the new town hall, I've got to almost do a Z, go to the right, go all the way back across the entrance and take a right to go in there. I would suggest putting a ramp that's similar on the right, on the left-hand side, so you don't have that up here, across, and up.
Yeah, and that's a great question. Unfortunately, when we have so much grade to travel, we need a lot of length of ramp. And so that length of ramp is the distance we need to get from grade to the bottom. And I understand, I believe where you're headed, and what we want to do is make sure that those provide equity in terms of how we're allowing that travel. Yes, I think that the distance of ramping required to get from one grade, that's why we started with that. We've got about 11 feet that we're trying to make up in terms of change there. And it does just require a certain amount of length of ramp.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
I got a follow-up question. Could you go back to the parking lot?
Yes, sir.
That's good enough. So I'm on Huntersville Concord Road going towards I-77, and I want to take a right onto 115 going north. So you know,
Sure.
115, I'm at that light, there's no right-hand turn on red.
Right.
So I'm going to cut through the parking lot and go right through the town hall and go out 115 and be on my way.
That is an astute observation. And I think, that to say that that would not happen would be probably folly. I mean, it is a right in and right out, and I don't know that that would limit that movement, but if you're making that turn, you're probably making that right-hand turn anyway.
To Commissioner Boone's point, when we get to this stage, would we not look at putting some type of speed bump or deterrent in the parking lot that would
Exactly
keep
right.
people from zooming through there?
You could look at an elevated pedestrian crossing, some things like that that could slow traffic and deter that.
I think a key point that we, one of the decisions we need to make tonight is, as he said, make sure, do we want that entrance off of 115, because it does slide the building up. And they give you very good, just go out the back door, and where the parking lot starts, that's about what your terrace will look like, as far as space.
Commissioner Kovacs.
On the next slide,
One more?
one more, sorry. So for option A, if you are in need of a wheelchair ramp, you cannot go down to the sidewalk on 115?
That is correct. You can go up towards the top of the page on the curved ramp to the sidewalk level that runs along the back of the building, and then you can come down that ramp to an entrance into the end of the building. But in terms of an accessible route, we still have what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 stairs there at the lower piece. That is an element that we can resolve. We can make it so that you can connect accessibly all the way to.
Well, my thought process is, we talked a lot about how this is in front of the trailhead and whatnot, and we've talked about strollers and all of that, and this can't be a nice way to get to the trailhead if you have to go down the, the stairs, so.
Sure. So I think if I'm hearing you correctly, we need to go ahead and resolve that, not just to the entrance, but all the way to grade at the lower plaza.
In my opinion, but I'm just.
And that's fine. We'll bring that back in future solutions. Just as we all have discussed, it'll just add more ramp to that solution. But we'll integrate that and resolve that well. Okay. Thank you all. Great discussion. We're going to shift gears and talk about another thing that we've talked about a few times already, which is sort of that chamber being the driver and where does it want to be located in the plan. And we had a few options and we've begun to whittle them down, which is great. We're working toward a decision. So we sort of have option A and option B still on the table. Option A is that on the first floor in the center. Option B is on the first floor on the left, and we've talked about the fact that it could be on the right, but that perhaps because of the relationship to the plaza that we just described, it would be best suited, contemplated on the left. So we've actually begun to show some furniture and some things in there, and we'll show you that at a different scale in a moment. But, again, this is sort of that topic. We had some feedback from your public safety locally, which was very beneficial. That was a great suggestion. I think that they were most focused on safe egress from this space and allowing that to happen in the most simplest way feasible. So that's something that our code requires anyway, but it's something that we wanted to make sure that we refresh as we talk about that this evening. I have a slide in a moment that zooms in on those. That'll be a better platform for that discussion. I just want to bring that up here. Thinking of it, though, from a design driver, we're talking about whether or not when you walk in the front door of the new town hall, just like you do when you come in here, if you walk directly on axis into the chamber. It's a tried and true design technique that you'll experience in, 80% of town halls that you would find in this area. The other one allows for a through movement or some type of central spine that directly connects the back parking lot to the front door, similar to the design that we had in the previous site, that perhaps allows for that clear circulation, but it does also push the chamber space, if you will, to one side to facilitate. So those are sort of the topics that we have on the center versus left side. I will also say the one in the center is what we call a black box, which means it's without windows, like this space, versus the chamber on the on one side could certainly integrate windows if we so chose.
So I have a quick question for you. Looking at this schematic, where would people be entering into Town Hall? Are they going to walk around the building and enter from Old Statesville from 115? Is that the expectation?
I think, oh, whoops, I'm sorry. I'm not supposed to use a pointer. I think the expectation is that they would enter from the parking lot side and from the front side. I mean, we want to encourage pedestrians that are entering from Old Statesville, but we have to be practical and realize that a higher percentage probably will come by vehicle that will want to enter the rear of the building.
Correct. So when they walk into that building from the parking lot space, what are they walking into?
So it's easier to envision that in option 2, right? Because you can sort of think about, I've walked into this central, sort of access that gives me clear orientation to how to move through the building. You're presented with a choice in having the chamber in the center because the chamber is in the center. We could pull the chamber forward so that you could enter the building in the middle and perhaps split around it, but our
That
depth
seems
is
like a
beginning.
waste of space.
It's it is a bit duplication of circulation. So you are presented with a choice as someone entering from the parking lot on option 1.
My other question is, with both of these options, do both of these options have the same amount of square footage space outside of the boardroom in order to maximize the square footage that we're, proposing?
So the generic answer to that is yes. And it's close enough to where when we get a decision, it will be by the time we finish resolving the plan. It's not a significant difference at this diagrammatic level. So In terms of loss of efficiency, I mean, clearly, as we talked about last time when someone brought up efficiency, the center chamber has hallways on either side. So there is slightly more circulation in option A than in option B, right? I mean, that's just sort of, I guess, if you squint and look at the yellow space. But you know, I think that there are also benefits to each of those, you know, relative to how you egress the building. And how you expect to experience the chamber as a first-time or building user. Do you expect that to be on axis when you enter the door? Or is it okay to come to a central node that you can sort of orient to the rest of the building and then see, oh, the space is here, I go in this direction. You'll also notice that we've shown that little yellow corridor from the right side of the plan towards the center. That's to give you an idea of when we talk about facilitating that connection from the plaza into the middle, it does cut that half of the, it cuts that side of the plan's usable space in half. So there will be some, depending on what functions go in there, that will potentially create some challenges. But again, if those are meeting spaces and things that are more publicly oriented, I think that that's certainly something we can make exciting.
Commissioner Boone.
Thank you. A couple questions. Will the chamber have windows, or is that what we're about to tell you?
I think the chamber in option 1 will not be able to have windows.
Okay,
The chamber in option 2 could have windows.
Let's look at option A then, and it looks good, but it looks like there's 3 entrances into this chamber where I can see people coming in from the parking lot and going in those 2 side doors instead of the main entrance.
Great, that's a great point.
Versus option B, which would have windows possibly.
It could.
You could, and you only have 1 entrance for our guest and the community,
There's technically 1 primary entrance, yes.
compared to 3 with the other one.
I think that's a good point. I want to be clear and say when we do assembly spaces with 200 people, we're always required to provide more than 1 means of egress.
Right, I
And
mean,
so
there's pros and cons for both things. Easy, get everybody out in a hurry versus everybody bottled up.
Yes, so I'm sorry, but yes, I think the answer to your question is yes, you were reading that correctly. I don't know if there was a.
So I'm coming at this from like a pragmatic point with option B. We've all been here when things are loud after a meeting out in the hall. I like B because it breaks it up. Groups can go different ways. It gets them away from the chamber so the meetings aren't interrupted. Also, I think it's more efficient for staff. Jackie may not like it as much because she won't get as many steps getting to walk from, you know, point A to point B in option A. But I feel like for the practicality of doing town's business, it would be easier on our staff to do B. But just experiences even at like the government center downtown and stuff, they shift the crowds to a gathering space where they can do whatever they need to do outside of the chambers, and it's not as disruptive, and here it gets so loud with that. So I'm more in favor of B.
Great point.
Commissioner Partee.
Thank you, Mayor. Option A, I have some qualms about being exposed to the street. I'm always safety-minded, having that background, and given the light and the environment that we have today, I like option B because it sort of provides protection and it doesn't expose us as commissioners and as staff to whatever might try to interfere or come in that might be a threat to us as a board. And it gives us a chance to deal with that threat in option B, whereas option A, we're exposed. I know we're going to speak to our safety department, but that's my assessment if I was asked. But I feel that option B is and plus we have the windows and the way to egress on top of that also. So yeah, that's what I like, option B. So that's my.
Great points. I forwarded the slide just to help facilitate this conversation. This is both options zoomed in on just the chamber, and the green arrows are intended to boldly show you sort of how you would have ways to egress the space. So I guess, you know, one of the other things about B is it does offer potentially a chance to go directly out from behind the dais. You know, we'd be 6 inches above grade, so we'll have a small ramp there to negotiate, but that's very easily accomplished, so.
Commissioner Kovacs has a question.
Well, I was gonna kind of, going off of what Commissioner Partee said, I like this entrance being kind of similar to how this is on option B, because I like to see the people coming in and smile, or, you know, like, I just feel comfortable seeing everyone as they come in, whereas coming in on the sides, and it's just too many places. But I really want windows, just to have that more welcoming feel. So I definitely like option B.
Thank you.
You know, Commissioner Kovacs, I agree with you, though it is so dark in here, and windows would certainly help brighten up the space for sure.
Well said. It's easy to sort of envision that when you've spent time in a black box chamber. So great discussion. Okay. Well, just to be mindful of time, I'm going to move ahead. We thought it would be fun because we talked about scale of the new dais, and yes, we're planning for 11 seats instead of the 9 that you're at currently. But on the left is sort of, these are intended to be at the same scale, by the way. On the left is where you are sitting this evening, and just because of when it was designed, you know, there was a little bit different concept of personal space. So there's a limited amount of room at the dais. On the new dais is spread out a little longer, and it certainly allows for, I'll just call it a little elbow room, as you all are all sort of sitting up there together. We think there's around 64 seats comfortably you can set in this room. That may be slightly challenged. The new space is planned for 200. You could actually get a few more in there. And again, I think that's just intended to give you a comparison in scale to the types of meetings that we could have in the new chamber versus the limitations of this building.
I would just say I appreciate the additional surface space up here that you've built in. There's no way to have my agenda, my notepad, and my iPad all still trying to see this screen. Just because the space is so limited. So this is good.
That's good. We've seen this model is evolving currently, and I'd be remiss if I mean, you know, people's concept of personal space is changing, and so we're seeing these just get a little wider than they used to be traditionally. So this is sort of a scale comparison of the chambers or boardrooms we're planning. Oh, I'm sorry.
Commissioner Boone and I were wondering, what's on the sides?
That can be any, those are all just placeholders. One side is showing a 3-person table in the event that you wanted to set up just like these folks. Oh, sure. Yeah, so.
No,
So those doors in the front that you're seeing, the ones that are in the dais area, would be like a low swinging door, if you will, a saloon door, sort of to separate the dais area from the main room. The idea with this setup is that you all could go outside doors and out directly into the support spaces, or you could come out through here and come down into the room. So it provides that movement in both directions. Did that answer your question? I'm sorry, that might be a little, it does read as a door in a wall. It's actually intended to be a low sort of swinging door.
What if we had to go into closed session? Are those rooms big enough for a 9, 10, 12 people?
Yes, sir. So the executive conference room, and again, it's the upper right red square there off the rear hallway. It's that room right there, sorry. It would be a size for 16, and that's the size that it's either this space, sorry for you all turn around, or it's either this room or that room. It's a conference room for 16, which would allow for your 11 plus 5 support spaces for staff. Great question. Yes. So just to go through that little suite quickly, there is the executive conference room that we just described. We do have some staff restrooms back there, and there is some storage that will be utilized just as the tables and chairs are moved. There's a small kitchenette included in that executive conference room, so y'all, if you are prepping for a meeting and need, you know, a sink or something of that nature. So those spaces off that back hallway behind the boardroom, if you will, sort of become the boardroom support spaces. And in option A, they're directly behind it, and option B, they are beside it. And those are sort of the differences there. Okay. I'm trying to be mindful of my time. Here we go. The existing town hall that we're in here has some great opportunities. And you'll see those red dots. Those are the actual steel columns. This is a really flexible building. The perimeter wall is load-bearing. That steel frame is held up by basically those 6 columns and a couple of tubes, which is really, really nice. The one thing as we begin to look at repurposing this building is we're going to be changing its use. Right now, as a town hall, it's classified as business. This room is an ancillary assembly use. It's going to basically become all assembly, which is going to increase the requirement for plumbing fixtures, which is something that we often run into. So I just wanted to go ahead and bring that. The new count, if we make this conversion, is going to need 5 plumbing fixtures per gender. So we have 4 options. None of these are the answer. These are things that we've kind of put on the table. And really, this just comes down to what type of assembly spaces should we include. The great thing about this building is if you could just envision sort of clearing out those 2 restrooms and what's behind these spaces, you can make a really nice, clean rectangle that lives in the portion of the building that has the raised roof. So you could have a space not unlike this that carries out to the lobby and back to the rear. It just fits within the frame very nicely. Yes, ma'am.
Going back to the bathroom stuff, could we go ahead and configure in doing a family bathroom?
Yes.
Because so many parents, if this is going to be a community center, we need to make it easier on them.
100%, and I believe we'd actually be required to have one, but we would have wanted to have one of those anyway. Great comment. So in order to make space for this testing of this idea, we have pushed the restrooms to the right side of the plan, which is a new idea, but it gets them out of the way so that the middle of the building can become this open room. You can see there we could do, those are 10 top tables. So what is that? That's actually should be 120 at banquet seating with a head table. And then we've sort of got some smaller conference rooms and touchdown spaces planned around each of the corners. And of course, the kitchen wants to remain as it was, the electrical room, some of those elements. That was kind of where we started. And then we just said, well, if you're going to make this large space in the center, someone's going to want to know if we could subdivide it. And so you certainly could, but that would require us to build in some type of chase or closet in order for the partition to tuck into. Most often you don't experience those because we're able to bury them in pockets of walls. That wouldn't be the case here, so you're going to see sort of that bump out on the side if we go to that, but it is doable. Option C, I have to give Paula credit for, was taking this space that we're talking about in the center and just connecting it all the way to the exterior in the rear. It makes that larger, and it gives it a connection directly outside. It also extends your banquet seating and your lecture seating and makes that space even larger in the center. You can still see those restrooms out on the side. And then one other thing that I should have pointed out in option B, if you look at the left side center of the plan, option A shows 3 small conference rooms and some touchdowns. Option B just shows it broken up into larger rooms. That's all super flexible, just depending on what program really wants to be taken on in there. I bring that to your attention because option D, I guess, is the Mr. Jaycock's scheme, right? Sorry, Michael. But we wanted to engage Parks and Rec as a part of this discussion because we know they're going to be a big player in what the potential programs that we could implement here. So one of the things that was of interest here is keeping the larger spaces on the sides as program, which is great, but we're going to have to find space for the restrooms. So you can see if we leave them sort of where they are and grow them, it just has an impact on the space in the center. And that's really all it comes down to. I think the high-level point on these options tonight to share with you is that the design team feels like with this study, we feel confident that we can integrate significant community space into this facility. So we're questioning whether or not there's a need to plan for large spaces like this in the new facility.
I think that's a great question.
And that's all that we have for you this evening.
So what questions do we need to answer for you this evening?
I think if we went all the way back to the 4 topics, we've talked about should we or should we not have an entrance drive from 115. That was number 1.
Okay.
Number 2 is chamber on the center versus on the side. My straw poll would say I heard a sort of on the side as a mini majority, but I would let you all tell me that. The other topic was what type of community spaces, could be implemented in this building, and these are examples of those.
Okay, So let's start with the first question, which was the drive from 115. Board members, anybody have a particular opinion on this one? Commissioner Boone? And yes, to the drive onto 115 with the right in, right out?
The meeting's over, yes, right, that's, well, you gotta have that on 115. The meeting's over, you got two entrances and exits to get out, and let's get the people home where they need to be.
Everyone else, is
The
there
changes-
consensus?
With the changes of the roads and how they're gonna be, I don't want people to have to drive around, like
Yes.
we were discussing, I don't even know how I would get into this building in the future, so I like 115.
Well, I agree with everything that everyone said thus far on that one. So I guess we will move forward with a drive connection. The next one is the boardroom center or off-center. Is it option A or option B? Anyone want to weigh in? B? B? Commissioner
It doesn't
Kidwell?
matter to me.
Okay. Commissioner Partee, B and B, so that we will do.
Bees have it.
The Bs have it.
I love it.
And then the community space. I think this one is an interesting one.
Let me just say that this one does not have to be answered this evening. The thing that we wanted to leave you with is that really ultimately we need to know if we think should be planning for a large space like this in the new building. That's the driver, so.
Can you clarify for us which one's the most versatile and which one would be the least versatile? And then I think we could go from there in the future.
Ooh, that's a great question. The most versatile is going to be the one with the operable wall, right? Because it gives you the flexibility to subdivide the space. The least versatile is probably C because it has the largest uninterrupted open space, or it might actually be D because of where the restrooms are in the center of the building and how that constrains it. They could, but we've struggled with putting them against, in the corner of the building where you have sort of, window onto wall, and so we try and prioritize spaces with daylight versus spaces internal to the building. Good, and, the answer is yes, although scale-wise, they may or may not fit.
I do have one question. Could you not put in the divider wall in option C?
You most certainly can. You certainly could.
That way you get the best of both worlds?
If that is of interest, absolutely.
I don't know.
That would give you the most, I guess, meeting room space, right? Option C with the,
It would. C is the largest center space, and if you subdivided it, that may give you both of those two things, the most flexibility and the largest center space. It is. Good idea.
Hybrid.
Excellent. Okay. Thank you all very much. What a great discussion. I appreciate your time again. We look forward to coming back to you soon with our next update.
Thank you, Brent. I appreciate that. Is there a motion to go into closed session?
Motion to go into closed session pursuant to NCGS 143-318, 11A5, to instruct staff on negotiating agents concerning the price and other materials, terms for acquisition of real property.
There's a motion, there's a second. All those in favor? None opposed? Folks, we will be right